Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to do another Twisted Alice in Wonderland 2.0, and this time I really wanted to do the twins, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, my own take on it, while we're talking about the history behind the creepy fairy tales that we grew up with. Just a little warning before we start this video, it's going to be a little graphic because we're going to be talking about really scary stories that aren't probably real. They're fairy tales, folklore. So let's get started. It's going to be a chit chat, get ready with me style like we've been doing. If you haven't seen my Alice already, and I did a Mad Hatter, you can definitely check those down below in the description box. So just so y'all know, I'm going to put a wig on later and I'm not naked. I have to do, well, I don't have to. I'm going to do body painting, and I'm going to do like a twisted look where the face looks like two faces in one. I hope I could do this. It's going to be difficult. So the first fairy tale that we're going to be talking about is Little Red Riding Hood. The fairy tale we all knew and grew up of that little girl in the forest with her best basket and her little red hood going to visit her grandmother's house. And she encounters a wolf in most of the fairy tales on the way. Some of the fairy tales depict that when she goes visits her grandmother, that the grandmother is not there and maybe have been eaten by the wolf, and the wolf is disguising as the grandmother. In some of the fairy tales, this originated in books early on by our guys, again, the Brothers Grimm. The Grimm fairy tales. Some of the classic faves, you know, Little Red Riding Hood is visiting her grandmother while she's sick with her little basket of goodies. Because most grandmas would do that for us, and she's just returning the favor in the original fairy tale of Little Red Riding Hood. Some of the fairy tales say that the wolf falls asleep and a lumberjack comes into the tale and like cuts his stomach open with the axe. I've never heard this one, but it's in the history books of Little Red Riding Hood apparently. And apparently in the tale where the axeman comes in, I'm gonna make another nose. The grandmother appears, I guess she wasn't dead, and they put stones in the wolf's stomach that he just cut open. Wild. So that he's unable to flee and he dies. Making a nose is difficult, especially on your cheek. Ooh, I'm gonna use a prosthetic nose. Why not? Little Red Riding Hood actually goes back to the 10th century in France, where peasants told it to Italians and they were so enchanted by this story. There's another story that was similar to it, and that might have been linked to it, that reminded a lot of people of it, called The False Grandmother. Or the story of the grandmother that's similar, but it's an org instead of a wolf, and the org pretends like it's the grandmother. So that's why it's kind of similar in some aspects. It's so weird to put a prosthetic on flat surface like this. Also in the Red Riding Hood folklore version where the grandma is like depicted as an ogre, this one gets really creepy because Little Red Riding Hood is tricked into thinking that the grandma's teeth was like rice and the blood was wine, but why would a child be drinking wine? Unless that's just what they did back then? I'm confused. Also that her flesh was steak, and so somehow the wolf tricks him, so she jumps into bed with the beast, and yeah, the little ogre, and Little Red Riding Hood end up getting gobbled herself, eaten alive. Crazy, right? I'm doing this right now so that we could do flesh tone later. This just looks like a sunburn nose now. Also, in one of the stories about Red Riding Hood, the wolf actually told her or asked her to take her clothes off and throw them in the fire. What? What kind of, wait, why? That's weird. I'm confused. All right, now that we have this all situated, let's put on some foundation and concealer. I'm gonna use a full coverage concealer. This is the E.L.F. camo concealer too. I don't know why, I just feel like they wouldn't have Tweedledee and Tweedledum wouldn't have eyebrows. Don't know what that is, but. So, while I'm stippling on foundation on my face, there was one story of Little Red Riding Hood. I feel like there's so many stories. It's kind of like, what's that rumor you whisper to each other type game when we were growing up? And you have to guess what the first person who whispered it said. It's kind of like that. But there was one story where, you know how girls, they always go to the bathroom together? Little Red Riding Hood told the wolf that she really needed to use the bathroom, if she was a child, like, children always gotta use the restroom. Well, all humans do, of all ages. So she used that as an excuse to get away, and she found her grandmother while she went to the bathroom and escaped that way from the wolf. So she realized his trickery and used the "I gotta use the bathroom really bad" story as like a really cool idea to get away. And it's told that in the story where she uses the bathroom as a trick to get away, the wolf is smart enough to actually put a string tied to her so she won't get away, but she somehow figures out a way to probably loosen it and escape. Which, yes, I'm making my cheeks really rosy and my nose too. I feel like Tweedledee and Tweedledum would almost look like they're sick. You don't want any contour. I want his face to look very round. It's interesting how all these versions of Little Red Riding Hood are so different, because in some of them, in instances, she's seen as using her wit to get away and tricking the wolf to get away. In other instances, she's seen as the Axeman is the one that saves her and the grandmother. So which one is it? Is it just like depends on who you hear from type of thing situation? Apparently there are several versions of Little Red Riding Hood, though, dated back 3,000 years. Apparently the first one was a Greek fable back in the 6th century BC. In China and Taiwan, there's actually tales that are similar to Little Red Riding Hood, which I'm not surprised, because a lot of Asian cultures, especially Japanese cultures, they have tales of females turning into foxes, and they're really into tales of animals interacting with humans that are kind of scary. So I know in Japanese culture loves this, and in China and Taiwan, not that it's totally similar, but they had stories called the Grandma Tiger that was similar to Little Red Riding Hood, and Grand Aunt Tigress. I'm trying to draw an eye while I speak. It's so difficult. So in the Chinese and Taiwan stories that are like Little Red Riding Hood, it is very similar, except instead of a tiger, instead of a wolf, it's a tiger, is what I'm trying to say. So hard to draw lips. In a French folklore in the 17th century, the grandmother of a child shares the same address as a wolf. So, same house? But in this narrative, the wolf asks the grandmother to come into bed with him, and that's where he eats her. But according to one of the early writers of the story, he said that it was a lesson to be learned for young little girls to not follow strangers or listen to them, which is great. Moral, I think. And this same author noted that he chose a wolf to be the villain because it resembles people. I guess the teeth and, the saying sheep's in wolf clothing. I wonder if that's what he meant too. I'm trying to make my eyes look very hollow. He says that some of them might be nosy and hateful, but they're perceived as being gentle, and you should not, just take them for their gentleness. 2 centuries later, the Brothers Grimm rewrote all these tales to put a red cap or a red hood on Miss Little Red Riding Hood to make their own tale narrative of it. Doing little freckles. The Brothers Grimm, some of their stories said a different tale. There's so many different variations of this, that the grandmother and the Little Red Riding Hood lured the wolf into her home with the smell of sausages through the chimney, and there was a manger filled with water, and they somehow trapped him, did away with him. The manger filled with water is where he drowned and died, deceased. Okay, so another crazy fairy tale movie book that we all grew up with was Pinocchio. And the history behind this is wild, because it was originally called The Adventures of Pinocchio, a Puppet Story by Carlo Collodi back in Florence in 1902. And the boy that was in the original story was not at all practical or learning his lessons. He was a very mischievous boy. So a lot of people have been saying that Walt Disney kind of put light to it. Some people say whitewashed it, because the author of the story wasn't a parent, and the story was actually not meant to be so lovely at all. It's very dark. Because from the very beginning of his story, he writes that Pinocchio is a very wretched boy. He's into a lot of mischief, like he likes it. The boy in this version skips classes, is very defiant, and creates quarrels, just really hates and does not want to go to school. I feel like every kid at some point doesn't want to go to school. Maybe that's just me. Especially, I don't know, Pinocchio faced bullies. And in this, he like gets in trouble with not only Geppetto, but the landlord, and he learns how to walk, but he disregards anything Geppetto's trying to teach him. And to top it all off, it's almost like he lies. He tells people that his maker abuses him, or implies that the maker is abusing him of Pinocchio, so Pinocchio's maker actually goes to jail. And in this version of Pinocchio, this is so sad. So you know how Jiminy Cricket is his conscience in the Disney version? Well, in this version, his version of Jiminy Cricket, his conscience, is squashed on the wall right away. So sad. I don't even want to imagine that. I'm just picturing mid When You Wish Upon a Star. No, that's too sad. And even though who plays Geppetto, Pinocchio's maker, gives him time after time chances and tries to do better or make him do better, teach him lessons, Pinocchio was happy to be given a last chance. But he's just so malicious that he ruins it, and he ends up being hanged on a tree. Yes, Pinocchio himself, hanged on a tree. I feel like McDonald's with a Peter Pan collar. And he was hung on a tree by people he chose to trust at the time because they spited him so much because he was so malicious. Crazy. In the original story, he's hung on a tree by a fox and a cat on a branch of a big oak tree. And in this story, apparently the hanging was unsuccessful, and there still continue to be carnivals and stuff like that. You remember that creepy? This was so creepy to me, the version of Disney where it's really dark how these kids are in cages and there's like, they're lured in by this carnival of getting candy and stuff from there's some dark hidden messages. There has to be in that. It's so creepy. I don't know why that was one of the creepiest Disney movies that frightened me as a kid. So it had to have been one of the first things I looked up when I was doing the history of these folk tales, because there has to be something dark, and there is. They tried to hang Pinocchio unsuccessfully. Pinocchio not only endured that, but he endured stabbings, muggings, abducted, tied, and whipped like a dog. It was completely dark. It's so crazy. Did they feel this way that they could do this because it's a puppet child? That's just as crazy to me. Beaten down and starved to death, but how could he starve if he's a wooden boy puppet? And there's one point where his legs were burned. His legs were burned clean off, and despite everything, Geppetto still replaced his legs. Pinocchio just seems like a spoiled child who's an ungrateful brat, and Geppetto just seems to keep taking, since he's seen, I'm sure, like a father figure that's like his son. Geppetto keeps taking him in and fixing him up. It's just so crazy how in Disney's version of this, Pinocchio is seen as a naive boy. And in the older tales of Pinocchio, he's very mischievous. I'm doing this in like reference to the Tim Burton version, having a collar that's striped. But this version is like a very complex bond between a parent-like figure and their child. It's more of like, do not bite the hand that feeds you type thing. All right, now's the exciting part. I get to put a wig on and a hat. I got a wig and a hat that kind of resembles the original Tweedledee and Tweedledum. This is like if Tweedledee was a parasitic kind of twin. Tweedledum. Got a little spinner hat. All right, now with that we are done. So this is my finished look of Tweedledee and Tweedledum with a little twist if it was like a twin growing from the face. I hope you guys enjoyed the creepy history behind the folk tales of Little Red Riding Hood and Pinocchio that we grew up with. So interesting. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. I also do beauty makeups. We do 2 videos a week every Monday and Friday. Right now we're doing these effects, like creepy twisted videos from Alice in Wonderland 2.0. I'm redoing it all over again. Hope you enjoy. All the products I use in this video will be listed down below in the description box as always. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment down below on some ideas of Alice in Wonderland characters you would love to see a twist on. Love to hear it. Even though I have a few ideas myself. Love you creators, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!